Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into a really complex and personal story of alleged persecution. It's all pulled directly from one man's public testimony, and it's a wild ride involving high-tech surveillance, digital censorship, and what he claims was a straight-up attempt on his life. This is the story of Reynaldo Aguiar. He became convinced that he was being targeted by a huge criminal network. And feeling like he had no other way out, he says he made a big, risky move to force a showdown, to drag his invisible enemies right out into the open. So let's talk about that provocation. The story he lays out really kicks into high gear on August 10th, 2025. This is the day he says he set a plan in motion, a plan based on a counter-surveillance method he developed himself, designed specifically to get a reaction from the people he believed were watching his every move. Okay, so to really get what Aguiar is doing here, you have to understand this tool he claims is at the center of everything. He calls it the Geo-Index. He says it's a database he managed to capture from this network. And according to him, it's not just some list of names. No, it's the network's own system for ranking people, places, and companies by how important they are to their whole operation. And using this index, Aguiar zeroes in on a man named Eduardo Hurtado. Hurtado's score? A massive 3.5 million. Now, to give you some perspective on that number, Aguiar claims this was an incredibly high score, even higher than some key locations tied to the network's top leadership. So for Aguiar, this meant Hurtado wasn't just some random agent. He was a seriously high-value target. Aguiar says he operates on a pretty simple three-step playbook he came up with: identify, evoke, and expose. It's straightforward. First, you use the data to identify a key player. Then, you evoke a response. You let them know that you know who they are. And finally, if they react in a criminal way, you expose them. And that is exactly what he claims he did. He sends Hurtado a blunt message saying, "Your cover is blown," and he even includes a link to his book, which is basically his brief on this whole network. He says this one move lit the fuse and triggered an immediate, coordinated, and very dangerous response. So this provocation, as he calls it, apparently set off a total firestorm. In the 48 hours that followed, Aguiar says he documented this whole series of escalating incidents that he saw as direct and calculated retaliation. Let's just walk through the timeline he lays out. It kicks off with what he calls an engineered message from an old friend. Then, the very next morning, a utility truck shows up and starts drilling on his property, right near his water main. That same afternoon, a bunch of weird delays happen at his son's preschool. And it all comes to a head in the middle of the night when he wakes up, as he puts it, violently ill. But the climax of all this, according to Aguiar's testimony, wasn't just him getting sick. He alleges that while he was out of the house picking up his son, someone actually broke into his home and deliberately contaminated his water supply. And he describes the physical part of this in, some pretty vivid detail. He says he woke up with his heart racing, pain in his stomach, and this really distinct, bitter, metallic taste in his mouth. And here's the kicker. In his own words, he says that at this point, he can actually distinguish between different poisons. So the big question is, right, how could he possibly know what happened while he was gone? Well, his proof, he says, came from a very, very unusual source. He says a security camera, which was pointed away from his gate, happened to capture the whole thing in the reflection of his shiny, recently washed car. The car was basically acting as a perfect, improvised mirror. And from that strange reflection, he pieced together this incredibly detailed video log. He claims it shows a whole coordinated sequence. First, a car moves, that's the departure signal. Then another car shows up, that's the go-ahead. And then, at timestamp 2:39, you hear it, the clear sound of his front gate opening, all while he was nowhere near home. He also cataloged all the physical symptoms he was feeling, which he believes came from two different sources. First, the water filter that he thinks was contaminated, and second, and this is a weird detail, his computer headset. He apparently has a habit of biting the cable, and he says that bitter taste came right back when he did it after the break-in. So after all of this goes down, Aguiar does what a lot of people would do these days. He posted his video testimony online, laying out the entire story. And this, according to him, is when the fight shifted from the physical world into the digital and, the legal arena. Aguiar presents a really clear cause and effect here. He says that the moment he published his story about the break-in, he was hit with two responses almost immediately. YouTube took his video down, and he got a court order for a mandatory psychiatric evaluation. Now, YouTube's official reason for the takedown was a violation of its community guidelines on sharing personally identifiable information. But Aguirre points out that the timestamp they flagged at first was right when he said Eduardo Hurtado's name. And then you've got another strange layer here with the court hearing. Aguiar claims his former partner had told him the hearing was scheduled for the very next day. But after his video about the break-in went live, he gets an official notice scheduling it for 25 days later. His speculation? It was a contingency plan, giving them plausible deniability if the poisoning had, well, worked. So all of this leaves us with an incredibly detailed, just unbelievably intricate narrative. It's packed with data, with video logs, with personal testimony. But the central question here is, what does it all mean? What are we supposed to make of this? Ultimately, Aguiar's story presents us with a pretty stark choice. Is this the meticulously documented account of one man's lonely fight against a powerful, invisible organization? Or is it the product of an elaborate, paranoid delusion? The evidence he presents is complex, and his claims are, frankly, extraordinary. His testimony forces us to confront a very modern dilemma. In an age of digital proof and platform censorship, how do we distinguish between persecution and paranoia?